Henry Morgan was a man who had built his world from the ground up. At 74 years old, he still lived in the modest two-story house nestled on the edge of a small town, the house he had spent decades crafting with his own hands. The wooden floors creaked softly under his feet, and the familiar smell of pine and aged books filled every corner. It was a home rich with memories, each photo frame and knickknack telling a story of a life well lived, though now tinged with loneliness. Since his beloved wife, Margaret, passed away 3 years ago, Henry's days had settled into a quiet rhythm: early morning walks, afternoons reading in the sunroom, and evenings by the fireplace with a cup of chamomile tea. The silence was sometimes soothing, sometimes deafening. His children lived busy lives far from him. His son John had a successful career in the city, rarely making the hour-long drive to visit. His daughter Sarah was caught up in her own family's whirlwind. The only light in his days was his granddaughter, Lily, a bright, kind-hearted 17-year-old with a smile that could lift any cloud. Henry often found himself staring at an old photograph on the mantelpiece, Margaret smiling beside him on their wedding day, young and full of hope. He traced the frame's edge with a calloused finger, longing for the warmth that had once filled this house. On most days, he kept his phone close, hoping for a call, a message, a sign that he mattered. And more often than not, it was Lily who reached out. "Grandpa, guess what happened at school today?" she would say, her voice bubbling with excitement. Or, "Can we bake those cookies you love next weekend?" Those moments stitched together the frayed edges of his heart. But the loneliness lingered, wrapping around him like a slow fog. One late afternoon, as Henry settled into his armchair with a book, the phone rang. The screen showed Lily's name. He smiled, fingers trembling slightly as he answered. "Hi, Grandpa," she chirped. "Mom says she's busy this weekend. Can I come over and help you with the garden?" "I'd like that, sweetheart," Henry replied softly. "I could use the company." They talked for a while, their voices weaving warmth into the chilly house. Plans were made for Saturday, for stories and laughter, for the simple joy of shared moments. After the call, Henry looked out the window. The sun dipped low, casting golden hues over the garden. For a moment, the weight of solitude lifted, replaced by a fragile hope. Yet, unknown to Henry, this quiet life was about to be shattered. And the voice that had brought him comfort would soon become the catalyst for a choice that would change everything. Saturday arrived with a crisp morning breeze. Henry's small garden was dotted with early blooms, but weeds had started creeping between the flowers, something that always bothered him more than he cared to admit. The front door creaked open, and in bounded Lily, her bright eyes sparkling with energy and a mischievous smile playing on her lips. "Grandpa, ready to get your hands dirty?" she called out as she stepped inside, brushing a strand of blonde hair behind her ear. Henry chuckled softly, his heart swelling at her enthusiasm. "Always, kiddo. Let's make this garden shine again." Together, they worked through the morning, pulling weeds, planting seeds, and laughing at silly stories from Lily's school. Henry felt alive again, the sun warming his face, the chatter filling the once quiet house. As the afternoon wore on, Lily paused and looked seriously at her grandfather. "Grandpa, I need to tell you something important," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. Henry wiped the sweat from his brow and gave her his full attention. "What is it, Lily?" She hesitated, then met his eyes with a steady gaze. "I overheard some things when I was at my mom's last night. Things I think you should know." Concern tightened Henry's chest. "What kind of things?" Lily glanced around, lowering her voice even more. "Mom's new friends, they're not who they say they are. They're planning to take over your house, maybe even more. They want you out, Grandpa." Henry's breath hitched. "What? That can't be right." Lily nodded grimly. "I know it sounds crazy, but I trust my instincts. You need to be careful. If they start pushing you, you have to leave. Now." Henry stared at her, heart pounding. This was the last thing he expected. The peaceful days, the quiet evenings, suddenly threatened by shadows he hadn't seen. "Thank you for telling me, Lily," he said, voice steady but low. "I'll be careful." We'll figure this out together. Later that night, Henry sat by the window, staring into the darkness. The warning echoed in his mind, sharp and unrelenting. The house that held a lifetime of memories now felt vulnerable, fragile. He wondered who exactly these friends were, and why they wanted him gone. But most of all, he trusted Lily. If she said danger was near, then he would act, even if it meant leaving everything behind. The next few days passed in a haze of unease. Henry found himself watching his surroundings with new eyes, the neighbors he barely knew, the unfamiliar cars parked nearby, even the phone calls that came and went with odd timing. Lily came over often, her presence a balm against the creeping anxiety. She sat with Henry late into the evenings, sharing stories and plans, but always with a cautious eye on the world outside. One afternoon, as Henry was fixing the loose door hinge on the back porch, he noticed a man lingering near the fence line. The stranger's gaze was cold and calculating, his movements deliberate. Henry's pulse quickened. "Lily," he said when she arrived, "I think your warning wasn't just a dream." Lily frowned. "You saw someone?" "Yeah. I think he's been watching the house for a while. I've never seen him before." They decided to keep their distance but remain vigilant. Meanwhile, Henry's phone rang late one night. The caller ID showed an unknown number. He hesitated but answered. A harsh voice spoke through the line, dripping with menace. "Grandpa Morgan, you're in the way. It's time to move on. Don't make this harder than it has to be." Henry's hand trembled, but he kept his voice calm. "Who is this?" Silence followed, then a click. The call ended. He looked at Lily the next morning, the fear buried beneath his calm. "We're deeper in this than I thought." Lily squeezed his hand. "We'll figure it out, Grandpa. You're not alone." The house, once a sanctuary, now felt like a battleground. But Henry was ready to protect the legacy of love and life it held, no matter the cost. The tension that had settled over Henry's life soon began to seep into his family relationships, revealing cracks that had long been hidden beneath polite smiles and holiday greetings. Henry tried reaching out to his son John, hoping for support. He dialed his number one crisp morning, heart pounding with anticipation. John answered after a few rings, voice brisk and distracted. "Hey, Dad. What's up?" "I need to talk to you about something serious," Henry began carefully. "Something that's been worrying me. I think someone is trying to push me out of the house." There was a pause. Then John sighed. "Dad, we've talked about this. You can come live with us. It's safer. You shouldn't be alone out there." Henry shook his head, even though John couldn't see it. "This house means a lot to me. I built it with my own hands. I'm not ready to give it up." John's tone grew sharper. "Dad, it's not just about the house. You're not thinking clearly. Mom wouldn't want you struggling like this." The conversation ended with frustration and unresolved tension. Next, Henry tried his daughter Sarah, hoping for a different response. But when he mentioned the threat, she brushed it off. "You worry too much, Dad," she said. "Maybe it's time to let go. You're not getting any younger." Feeling isolated, Henry realized that even his own family saw him as a problem to manage, rather than a man fighting for what was his. Only Lily stood firmly by his side, her youthful determination a beacon in the growing storm. "I believe you, Grandpa," she said. "We'll protect you. No matter what." Henry's resolve strengthened. He wasn't just fighting for a house. He was fighting for respect, for dignity, and for the love that still lived between the walls he called home. The days after his strained calls with John and Sarah left Henry with a heavier weight on his chest. He felt isolated, surrounded by a family that seemed to be drifting further away, consumed by their own lives and opinions about what was best for him. Yet, despite the distance, he refused to give up the home that held his memories and the essence of his life. Henry's daily routine became one of vigilance. He began noticing small, unsettling things around his property. The faintest footprints in the garden soil that didn't belong to any neighbor, the quiet hum of unfamiliar cars passing by, and the sensation of being watched. Every shadow seemed darker, every knock on the door more threatening. One morning, as he stepped outside to check the mailbox, Henry spotted a flyer stuck under the windshield wiper of his old pickup truck. The paper was glossy, professionally printed, with a logo he didn't recognize. The message was clear and cold: property for sale. Contact agent Michael Reynolds. His heart skipped a beat. Someone was trying to sell his home without his knowledge. Or at least, that's what the flyer implied. Henry folded the flyer carefully and pocketed it, anger and confusion swirling inside him. Later that day, Lily arrived for her weekly visit. She was quick to notice the flyer in his hand. "Grandpa, what's that?" she asked, eyes wide with concern. Henry sighed deeply. "Someone's trying to push me out, Lily. They're starting to make moves." Lily frowned, her youthful face hardening with resolve. "Do you think it's those people you mentioned before?" "I do," Henry replied. "And now it's becoming more than whispers and warnings." The two sat down at the kitchen table, strategizing quietly. Henry explained that he planned to meet with a lawyer, someone who could help him understand his rights and protect his home. But he also knew that legal battles could drag on for months, maybe years, and he wasn't sure if he had that kind of time. That evening, Henry sat alone in the living room, the flickering light of the fireplace casting long shadows on the walls. Memories of Margaret filled his mind, her laugh, her gentle hands, the way she always believed in the strength of family. He whispered into the silence, "I won't let them take this from us. Not without a fight." Suddenly, his phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "You're running out of time, Grandpa. Leave now, or face the consequences." Henry's hand tightened around the phone, but his eyes burned with determination. He would not be intimidated. He would protect his home, his legacy, for as long as he lived. Henry knew that facing the threat alone would be a losing battle. Despite the rift with his children, he still believed in the power of community and old friendships. Early the next morning, he decided to reach out to his longtime neighbor, Martha, a widow in her 70s who had lived next door for over 30 years. He found her tending her rose bushes, her face lit by the soft glow of dawn. "Martha," Henry began hesitantly, "I need your help." She looked up, concern immediately etched across her features. "Henry, what's wrong?" Henry handed her the flyer. "Someone's trying to force me out of my home. They're spreading rumors, and there have been threats." Martha frowned, gripping the flyer tightly. "That's terrible. You're not alone, Henry. I'll talk to some of the neighbors." Together, they decided to hold a neighborhood meeting that weekend. Henry also contacted an old friend, Paul, a retired attorney who had helped him years ago with minor legal issues. Paul promised to look into the situation immediately. In the days that followed, Henry and Martha went door to door, rallying the community. Many neighbors had noticed suspicious activity but had been too afraid to speak up. Now, they offered support, sharing stories of strange cars and unfamiliar faces lurking near their homes. Henry felt a renewed strength in the collective spirit of the neighborhood. He was reminded that while family could sometimes falter, community could rally in unexpected ways. One evening, as Lily helped him plant new flowers in the garden, Henry looked at her and smiled. "You were right, Lily. Trusting you was the best decision I ever made." Lily grinned back. "I knew you'd see it, Grandpa." But even as hope bloomed, the danger was not gone. The shadows around Henry's life grew darker, and he knew the coming days would test every ounce of courage he had left. Henry woke up early that morning with a knot tightening in his stomach. The flyer, that cold, official-looking piece of paper, still burned in his pocket like a symbol of everything that was wrong in his world. It wasn't just about property anymore. It was about trust betrayed, about family fractured, and a creeping fear that his life's work might slip through his fingers. He shuffled into the kitchen, brewed himself a cup of strong coffee, and sat by the window, watching the neighborhood slowly wake up. The birds chirped as usual, and the sun painted long golden strokes across the cracked pavement. But Henry felt anything but calm. After a moment, he stood up with renewed resolve and grabbed his coat. There was one person he could turn to, someone who had seen the neighborhood's every secret, who had known him and his late wife for decades: Martha. Martha was a sprightly woman in her 70s, known for her encyclopedic knowledge of local history and an unmatched ability to bake the best apple pie in town. He found her tending to her beloved rose bushes, carefully pruning the thorny branches while humming a familiar tune. "Good morning, Martha," Henry called softly, not wanting to startle her. She looked up and smiled warmly. "Henry, it's been a while since I saw you out this early. Everything all right?" Henry hesitated but then pulled the flyer from his pocket, smoothing the edges between his fingers. "I'm afraid not. Someone's trying to push me out of my home." Martha's eyes darkened as she took the flyer, reading the words silently. "This is serious. You know, I've noticed strange cars parked at odd hours. People peeking over fences. But I thought it was just kids." Henry shook his head. "It's more than that. I've had threats. Phone calls. I don't know who these people are, but they're determined." Martha placed a reassuring hand on his arm. "You're not alone, Henry. We'll figure this out together." Henry felt a flicker of hope spark inside. Maybe, just maybe, he wouldn't have to face this storm alone. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. Henry and Martha began rallying the neighbors, going door to door with copies of the flyer and quietly sharing what was happening. Many of the older residents expressed similar concerns: strange visitors, sudden inquiries about property values, odd noises at night. One neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, confided, "I saw two men taking pictures of your house a week ago. They didn't look like real estate agents." Henry jotted down the details, feeling the community's protective spirit awaken. Meanwhile, Henry reached out to an old friend, Paul, retired now, but sharp as ever, and the only person he trusted to navigate the legal maze that awaited him. Paul responded immediately, offering to meet at Henry's house and review the documents and notices Henry had received. They pored over legal jargon and contracts late into the evening, Paul explaining the possibilities and potential defenses. "There's a lot we can do, Henry," Paul assured him. "But it's going to take time and patience. These people don't play fair, but neither do we." Through it all, Lily remained Henry's anchor. She helped plant fresh flowers around the porch, reminding him of life's resilience amid chaos. She chattered about school and friends, her laughter a soothing balm to his worried mind. One afternoon, as they sat on the porch swing watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, Henry took Lily's hand. "You were right to warn me, Lily," he said softly. "Trusting you was the best decision I ever made." Lily smiled, her eyes twinkling with youthful certainty. "I knew you'd see it, Grandpa." Yet beneath the peace, a dark cloud loomed. Henry knew this was just the beginning of a battle that would stretch him to his limits, testing his faith, his strength, and the very foundation of the home he loved. As night fell, the house creaked softly in the wind, and Henry vowed silently to protect it, no matter what. As the days passed, Henry found himself caught in an exhausting cycle of vigilance, uncertainty, and cautious hope. Despite the community's support and the advice from Paul, the shadow of the threat against his home seemed to grow larger, more ominous. One chilly autumn evening, Henry was sitting in his favorite armchair by the fireplace, the soft crackling of the logs blending with the distant sounds of the wind rattling the windowpanes. Lily was curled up nearby, reading a book, her brow furrowed in concentration. The warmth of the room stood in stark contrast to the cold fear gnawing at Henry's heart. Suddenly, the phone rang sharply, breaking the silence. Henry's hands trembled as he reached for it. "Hello," he answered, voice wary. A cold, unfamiliar voice replied, "This is your final warning, Henry. Leave the house now, or you'll regret it." The line went dead. Henry sat frozen, the weight of the threat settling over him like a thick fog. He looked at Lily, who was now staring at him with wide, frightened eyes. "We have to tell the police," she said quietly. Henry nodded slowly, reaching for his coat. The next morning, he went to the local police station to report the threats. The officers listened patiently but warned that without concrete evidence, their hands were tied. They advised Henry to be cautious, install security cameras, and document everything. Returning home, Henry felt a mix of frustration and resolve. The law offered little protection, but he wasn't about to back down. That afternoon, Henry and Martha organized a neighborhood watch group. They set schedules, exchanged phone numbers, and agreed to keep an eye out for anything suspicious. Henry installed security cameras around the property, learning new technology with Lily's enthusiastic help. Despite these measures, strange incidents continued. One night, the garden gate was found open, flowers trampled, and footprints leading toward the back door. Henry's heart pounded as he inspected the damage. "Someone's testing us," he murmured. "Trying to wear me down." His children remained distant. John avoided calls, and Sarah's messages were curt, tinged with impatience. The family fractures ran deep, their silence more painful than any threat. But Lily was a constant source of strength. One evening, as Henry sat exhausted in his study, Lily brought him a cup of tea and sat beside him. "Grandpa, you're the strongest person I know," she said softly. "I believe we'll get through this." Her words lifted him, reminding him that family wasn't always about blood. Sometimes it was about who stood by you when it mattered most. The struggle was far from over, but Henry was ready to face whatever came next. His home, his dignity, and his bond with Lily were worth fighting for, no matter the cost. The weeks that followed felt like an endless battle, with Henry caught between mounting threats and the painful silence of his estranged children. Yet, amidst the growing tension, a surprising ray of hope appeared one rainy afternoon. Henry was in the kitchen, cleaning up after dinner, when the doorbell rang. It was unusual for visitors to come without warning, especially these days. He wiped his hands nervously and opened the door. Standing there was a young woman, no older than 30, with kind eyes and an uncertain smile. She held a folder tightly in her hands, and her clothes were slightly damp from the rain. "Hello, Mr. Harrison," she said gently. "My name is Claire. I work with a local community assistance program. I heard about the trouble you've been having, and I wanted to see if there's any way we could help." Henry blinked in surprise. He wasn't used to strangers offering kindness, especially now. Claire continued, "We help seniors who are facing housing insecurity or threats to their homes. We have resources, legal, financial, even social, that might ease your burden." Henry felt a lump form in his throat. It had been months since he felt anyone truly cared. He invited Claire inside. Over tea, Claire explained the programs, the lawyers on retainer, and the volunteers who could help with daily tasks if needed. She also mentioned support groups where Henry could share his story and find strength in community. For the first time in a long time, Henry felt a flicker of relief. As Claire left, she handed Henry her card and said warmly, "You're not alone, Mr. Harrison. We're here for you." That evening, Henry sat with Lily on the porch swing, the rain pattering softly around them. "You see, Grandpa?" Lily smiled. "Help can come from the most unexpected places." Henry nodded, feeling a cautious hope bloom in his heart. Yet, even with this newfound support, the storm clouds of conflict were far from clearing. The unseen enemy was still out there, watching, waiting, ready to strike again. The days following Claire's visit brought a sense of cautious optimism for Henry. With her assistance, he had connected to local resources and legal aid, but the sense of impending danger never fully lifted. One night, as Henry lay in bed, the house silent except for the ticking clock, a faint noise stirred him awake. At first, it was just a soft creak, then the unmistakable sound of footsteps near the back door. Heart pounding, Henry reached for the flashlight beside his bed and quietly slipped out of the room. He moved slowly down the hallway, every step measured, every breath shallow. Peering through the window, he spotted a shadowy figure lingering near the garden. The intruder moved deliberately, fiddling with the lock on the back door. Henry's mind raced. Should he call the police? Or confront the intruder himself? Before he could decide, the figure stopped and looked up, as if sensing Henry's gaze. A chilling silence followed, then the shadow melted into the darkness, disappearing into the night. The next morning, Henry found a small, crudely folded note tucked under the front door. "Leave now. This is your last warning. Lily came running in, concern written all over her face. Grandpa, are you okay? Did you call the police? Henry nodded, showing her the note. Yes, I did. But the real battle is just beginning. Together, they reviewed security footage from the cameras Henry had installed. The image was grainy, but the figure was unmistakable, a tall man in a dark hoodie, face obscured. Fear crept in, but Henry refused to let it consume him. Instead, he channeled it into determination. He reached out to Paul and Claire, updating them on the escalation. Paul advised, "We need to get a restraining order and beef up security. Also, let's look into who might be behind this." Claire arranged for a social worker to check in regularly and offered counseling support for Henry and Lily. Despite the mounting threats, Henry's resolve remained unbroken. The home he loved, the memories he cherished, and the granddaughter who believed in him were reasons enough to keep fighting. The morning light filtered softly through the curtains as Henry sat at his kitchen table, surrounded by papers, phone numbers, and notes. The tension that had settled over the past weeks now transformed into a relentless pursuit for answers. With Paul's help, Henry began digging deeper into the origins of the threats and the flyer that had first warned him to leave. They combed through public records, scrutinized recent property transactions, and traced unfamiliar names linked to his neighborhood. One name kept surfacing, a local developer known for aggressive tactics, Gregory Shaw. Paul looked up from his laptop, eyes sharp. This guy's reputation isn't clean. He's known for strong-arming homeowners to sell their properties cheaply so he can flip them for profit. Henry's jaw tightened. Could he be behind this? It's likely. But we'll need solid proof. Henry's mind raced back to the strange cars and men Martha and the neighbors had seen. A plan began to form. He and Lily decided to attend the next city council meeting, hoping to bring community voices together and expose the underhanded practices threatening their neighborhood. The meeting hall was crowded and tense. Henry spoke passionately about the threats he'd faced and the importance of protecting their homes from predatory developers. To his surprise, several neighbors stood up, sharing similar stories, threats, coercion, and attempts to buy their properties under duress. Gregory Shaw sat silently in the back, his expression unreadable. Henry felt a surge of hope. They weren't alone. After the meeting, Claire approached Henry, her eyes bright. "This is just the beginning, but you've already started something important." That night, Henry sat with Lily on the porch, gazing at the stars. "Grandpa," she said softly, "sometimes the truth is the strongest weapon." Henry nodded, feeling a quiet strength settle over him. The fight was far from over, but now he had allies, community, and hope. The days that followed the city council meeting marked a turning point in Henry's fight. The community's growing support bolstered his spirit, but it also drew more attention, not all of it welcome. One afternoon, Henry received an unexpected visitor, his estranged son, John. John stood awkwardly on the porch, a mixture of guilt and determination on his face. He hadn't been in touch for months, avoiding calls and ignoring messages. Now, he was here, looking older and wearier than Henry remembered. "Dad," John began hesitantly, "I heard about what's happening. I want to help." Henry studied his son carefully. Years of hurt and silence had built a wall between them. But beneath John's rough exterior, Henry sensed genuine regret. "I won't pretend the past didn't hurt," Henry said quietly. "But if you're serious, there's a lot to do." John nodded, relief flooding his eyes. "I want to make things right." Over the next days, John worked alongside Henry and Lily, helping to spread awareness about Gregory Shaw's tactics and strengthening ties with neighbors. He even attended meetings with Paul and Claire, learning the legal ropes. Their tentative reconciliation was fragile but real, a hopeful sign that family, though fractured, could begin to heal. Yet, as they united, the shadow of danger loomed larger. Threatening messages increased, and one night, John found a note slipped under their door. "Stay out of this, or else." Henry knew the battle wasn't just for his home anymore. It was for his family's future. With renewed resolve, the reunited family prepared for the fight ahead, determined to protect what mattered most. The growing threats weighed heavily on Henry, John, and Lily, but their resolve only strengthened. They knew that surrendering meant losing not just their home, but their dignity and the hope of a healed family. The neighborhood watch had evolved into a formidable network. Volunteers installed more security cameras, organized patrols, and shared information relentlessly. Community spirit blossomed where fear had once thrived. Henry, with Paul's legal guidance, filed formal complaints and pushed for injunctions against Gregory Shaw's company. The local media caught wind of the story, and soon, reporters came knocking. One afternoon, Henry found himself sitting across from a television interviewer, the lights hot, the questions probing. "Mr. Harrison, what keeps you fighting despite these dangers?" Henry looked directly into the camera, voice steady but passionate. "Because this isn't just my home. It's my legacy. It's where my family's memories live, and I refuse to let greed take that away." The story resonated deeply with the community, sparking donations, legal aid offers, and public pressure on local officials. But the fight was far from over. One night, as Henry locked the door, a loud crash shattered a window. Shards of glass scattered across the floor. John's voice was firm. "They're trying to intimidate us." Henry sighed but met his son's gaze. "Then we stand firmer." That night, as rain pelted the windows, the family sat together, united against the storm outside and within. The broken window was a stark reminder: the enemy was not willing to back down. Yet Henry, John, and Lily stood unshaken, their bond forged stronger by adversity. In the following days, the legal battle intensified. Paul filed a suit challenging Gregory Shaw's attempts to force sales through intimidation and deceit. The evidence from the neighborhood watch cameras and witness testimonies built a solid case. At home, Claire and the social workers provided emotional support to Henry and his family. Lily continued to be a beacon of hope, her youthful optimism grounding the adults. One afternoon, as Henry reviewed documents, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You think you can fight me? Watch closely." Henry showed the message to John and Paul. It was a clear threat, but also a sign that their resistance had rattled Gregory. The community rallied. Petitions circulated, protests were organized, and local officials were pressured to take action against the developers' tactics. Finally, a hearing date was set. On the morning of the court hearing, Henry stood outside the courthouse, dressed sharply but nerves jangling. John and Lily stood by his side. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with anticipation. Gregory Shaw appeared confident, but the tide had clearly turned. Henry took a deep breath and spoke, not just for himself but for everyone who had faced injustice. "This fight isn't just about me or my home," he said steadily. "It's about standing up to those who use fear and power to silence the vulnerable." The judge listened intently, and after hours of testimonies and arguments, the ruling came: a temporary injunction halting all aggressive sales and requiring Gregory's company to halt any further intimidation. Cheers erupted outside the courthouse. Henry exhaled deeply, feeling the weight of months lift slightly. The battle was far from over, but the first real victory had been won. The courtroom victory was a breath of fresh air, yet Henry knew it was just a momentary reprieve in a long struggle. As he stepped out into the sunlight, the crowd of supporters who had gathered around him cheered, neighbors, friends, even some former skeptics, all united by a shared cause. John clapped him on the back, a genuine smile breaking through years of tension. Lily, holding tightly to her grandfather's hand, looked up with bright eyes full of hope. But beneath the surface, Henry wrestled with complex feelings. The battle had taken its toll: the fear, the broken family ties, the nights spent awake listening for threats. Yet the fight had also revealed unexpected truths about resilience, forgiveness, and what family truly meant. That evening, Henry sat alone on the porch, the cool breeze rustling leaves around him. The peaceful silence was a stark contrast to the turmoil inside. He thought about the past, the moments of warmth with his late wife, the distant relationship with his children, and the growing bond with Lily, the granddaughter who had become his anchor and inspiration. Henry knew that while the injunction gave them legal protection, the emotional wounds ran deeper. The next day, he reached out to his children again. This time, the message was different, less about demands or resentment, more about understanding and a fragile hope for reconciliation. John responded cautiously, suggesting a meeting. Sarah remained silent. When they finally met, the conversation was awkward, layered with unspoken pain but also tentative attempts at healing. Henry spoke honestly about his fears, the threats, and the loneliness of the fight. John shared his regrets, admitting how distance had made things worse. Though the wounds were far from healed, the dialogue opened a door that had long been closed. Meanwhile, Henry continued working with Claire and Paul to ensure the community's safety and to push for stronger protections against predatory developers. Lily blossomed, attending school with new friends and sharing stories of her grandfather's courage. One quiet night, as Henry and Lily sat watching the stars, he smiled softly. "Sometimes," he said, "peace isn't about winning battles. It's about finding the strength to keep going, even when the future is uncertain." Lily nodded. "And knowing you're not alone." Henry realized she was right. The fight had changed him, not just as a homeowner or a fighter, but as a man learning the meaning of family, trust, and resilience. The days following the fragile peace brought a new rhythm to Henry's life, quieter, but filled with a deeper sense of purpose. The legal battles had paused, but the journey toward healing and rebuilding was only beginning. Henry had grown accustomed to the peaceful mornings, waking up early to the gentle light streaming through the curtains. He would brew his coffee slowly, savoring the calm before the day began. The house no longer felt like a battleground, but a sanctuary. Lily was thriving, her laughter echoing through the rooms, her curiosity insatiable. She had become his constant companion, and their bond deepened with each passing day. John had made efforts to stay connected, visiting more frequently and offering support in small, meaningful ways. Their conversations, once awkward and strained, now held a tentative warmth. One evening, as Henry sat on the porch with Lily curled up beside him, the radio played softly in the background. The news was quiet tonight, no threats, no headlines about the struggle, just peaceful voices and gentle music. Henry closed his eyes and took a deep breath. The battle had changed him, shaped him into someone stronger, wiser, more patient. He remembered the early days of fear and anger, the nights filled with worry, the cold silence between family members. And yet, here he was, still standing, still hopeful. The final moments of that night were calm. Henry opened his eyes and looked at Lily's peaceful face, illuminated by the porch light. He whispered softly, "Not every silence is weakness. Sometimes, it's the only way to keep what matters." The camera slowly pulled away, capturing the tranquil scene, a grandfather and granddaughter, united by love and quiet strength, ready to face whatever the future might hold. Thank you for following Henry's story. If you enjoyed this heartfelt journey of family, resilience, and justice, please like, share, and subscribe for more soul-stirring tales. Explore our other stories here on When Karma Strikes, where every betrayal meets its reckoning, and every silence holds a secret strength.